Hello. I thought I would provide a little introduction to horoscopes using whole sign rising signs because it's something that I didn't get to talk about in session 4 of Introduction to Astrology. So if you're part of that class, there's a little bonus material. If you're part of my Patreon, you may need a little bit more astrological information first to understand how this works. But feel free to ask me questions in the Patreon. And if you are just watching this because you somehow found the YouTube video, welcome. Um, this is a little bonus thing that I thought I would provide because a lot of people don't really understand how horoscopes are created. I think it's a really easy way to see how houses function and how different transits translate into full sign, rising sign horoscopes. So, what do I mean by that? Let's look at this horoscope for the new moon in Scorpio for Aries. Now, the new moon in Scorpio happened on late November 19th Pacific time, which is what I think Chani is based in. Otherwise, for most people, it was on the 20th, but it was happening in Scorpio, right? So we have here for Aries, your collaborations are ready for an upgrade. Today's new moon in Scorpio, right? That's what we're talking about, marks a new beginning. All new moons do, but it's up to you to work with it. Start by zeroing in on partnerships and joint projects you want to nurture over the next 6 months. So, this is the 6 month cycle from new moon in Scorpio to full moon in Scorpio, which happens on the other side of the calendar year in Taurus season. Then commit to throwing your time and energy into goals. Investing in this part of your life is worth the risk. So, where does that actually come from, right? It's not totally random. If we look at other horoscopes for that day, you might see similar language. It would be different because Johnny has slightly different interpretations of things like houses than some other astrologers. There's obviously a chattier vibe. But what I have here is an Aries whole sign house chart. So if you are an Aries rising, your whole sign would be tied to this chart, where the first house is tied to Aries, the second house is tied to Taurus, etc. So, for our purposes, the new moon occurred in Scorpio, which means that it's happening in the eighth house. Where in the eighth house? It's actually really late. It's like the very tail end of Scorpio, way up here. But for pretty much any Aries rising, whole sign or otherwise, it's happening in the eighth house. Because horoscopes are for a large audience, right? This is not a one-on-one thing. Astrologers cannot possibly anticipate every possible rising sign degree if you're using something like a Placidus system. And so mass horoscopes have to use whole sign, and they are always based on your rising sign. A lot of people will look for their sun sign, not relevant here. Right? If your sun sign is Aries, your rising sign might be Aries, but this uh, horoscope, right? If we look at what Chani had to say about Aries, oops, had to say about Aries, right? Talking about joint projects. That's eighth house stuff. It may not be as obvious because this is a slight, this reference to partnerships may make you think of seventh house stuff. That is just a variation on how Chani is interpreting the eighth house, but joint projects is certainly something that you would be thinking about with eighth house as opposed to seventh house. And that is because, right, that is relevant for the new moon in Scorpio for Aries because Aries rising has the eighth house, Scorpio, right? So that's where the new moon is going to be. So it is a new start in all eighth house stuff, right? If we were looking at Gemini, Gemini's eighth house is not Scorpio, right? The eighth house is tied to Capricorn. So it wouldn't make sense for a Gemini rising to have that Aries rising horoscope. It just wouldn't make sense because their eighth house stuff is tied to Capricorn, not to Scorpio. Scorpio is tied to the sixth house for a Gemini rising, again, using a whole sign house system. So if we look at the Gemini horoscope, we're going to see a new start in sixth house stuff, right? So the new moon in Scorpio marks a new beginning, similar language, but it's up to you to work with it. Start by zeroing in on wellness routines, health regimens, and productivity habits. That is all sixth house stuff. Um, right? If we look at Leo, right, new moon in Scorpio marks a new beginning. It's up to you to work with it. Start by zeroing in on family ties that you want to nurture, housekeeping projects, right? So, where do we think this new moon is happening? For a Leo rising, chances are good it is happening in the house that's associated with those, which I assume would be the fourth house. Let's look. We have Leo rising here. Where is Scorpio? It happens to be doo, 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 fourth house. So, housekeeping, family, familial relationships that you want to nurture, that is all fourth house stuff. So, because the new moon is happening there, that area is getting special treatment for that particular sign. Whatever house is associated with Scorpio gets a kind of new start. And that's why those horoscopes are all sort of similar sounding, except for the area where the new moon is bringing new energy. Now, if we wanted to look at, say, just a random day rather than that, we would look at the transits for a given day. So on November 22nd, and this, by the way, is not Pacific time. This is Universal Coordinated Time. So some of the, days might be off compared to Pacific time. But an astrologer who is writing a horoscope would be looking at the transits for that particular day. So the sun enters Sagittarius, the moon enters Capricorn. This is yesterday, as of when I'm recording this, that the sun entered Sagittarius, because again, this was very early in the morning, universal coordinated time. So that would have been yesterday for those of us in the United States. Then we also have the moon entering Capricorn. This actually just happened a couple of hours ago. So a horoscope for today would be talking about the moon entering Capricorn. Yesterday's probably was talking about the sun entering Sagittarius, again, just based on, where your astrologer is located. So if we go back to the Chani app, or the Chani website, I should say, let's go back to Aries and just see what's going on for today. We had the moon entering Capricorn. Um, yeah, the moon entering Capricorn. Which I don't even know how relevant this is. You can find new ways to negotiate. That's very seventh house coded. If you've been too focused on what's not working in your collabs, flip the script. The collabs again is a reference to the new moon in Scorpio. Name one thing that's going well, or at least okay. I don't know what this is all referencing. Let's look at the 21st. So this is as the sun enters Sagittarius. Um, right, think big picture about your goals. Don't waste energy trying to perfect timelines or sort out every detail. Stay open to picking up on factors you haven't considered yet. Spend time with teachers, spiritual guides, or wise friends. This is all ninth house coded. So if we look at our chart, here's Aries rising. We have, right, the sun is now in Sagittarius. just entered there. Sagittarius is associated with the ninth house. So the sun is now shining down on the ninth house areas, opening up new focus on those areas. Those are things like personal expansion, higher education, teachers, spirituality, that sort of thing, as we saw in the horoscope for that particular day yesterday when the sun entered Sagittarius. If we look at Gemini, we will see Sagittarius is in the seventh house. So I'm going to predict that the horoscope for yesterday was about how the sun being in Sagittarius means that there's now a focus on intimate relationships, close connections, sort of lovers, best friends, perhaps that kind of thing. So let's go ahead, look at, we have Gemini. If we look at the 21st, right? Your close relationships. First thing, right? Um, check your bonds with loved ones. Be honest about whether they're inspiring you. Uh, yeah, so there's this really nice sort of combination here. How are how are you limiting your own sense of adventure in your one-on-one? So the one-on-ones is seventh house coded. The adventure is Sagittarius coded, right? How could you practice being more curious and open minded? That is Gemini, as well as Sagittarius. And it is about the interpersonal, all of that seventh house stuff. I like that one much more than the Aries one. If we look at Leo, right, for the same day as the sun enters Sagittarius, you can tap into your power and your sense of purpose by having fun. Go on all the friend dates, take up some new art projects, test out those hobbies you've always been curious about. So, again, curiosity, Sagittarius coded. You don't have to commit to only one pastime, all pastime, hobbies, having fun, art project, friend dates. This is all fifth house coded. So, hopefully, Leo rising is showing Sagittarius in the fifth house. And yes, of course, it is because we just had the new moon in the fourth house, Scorpio, but here we have Sagittarius. The sun is now entering the fifth house. So it is illuminating those things for Leo rising. So this is how horoscopes take into consideration major astrological transits. Super curious about um, what we were seeing with the 22nd. Uh, Obviously, a little bit more complex than a new moon. Let's go back into here. So the 22nd for Leo, we have a couple of different things that could be happening. This could be about the Mercury trine Saturn. This could be about the moon entering Capricorn or about Mercury trining Jupiter. Those are the sort of three US November 22nd events. So those would all feed into astrological considerations. Um, so going back here, what does it say? Have some healing conversations with the people closest to you. That could be a variety of placements. That could be four, that could be seven, fourth house, seventh house, could even be third or fifth house, 11th house. Lots of different options there. If you've been too focused on what's not working with family or roommates, flip the script. So Mercury in this case is happening. Got it. Okay. If you've been too focused on what's not working with family or roommates. So let me see if, yeah. So if we go back to this transit, Mercury trine Saturn, and then Mercury trine Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter are opposing energies. Mercury is in a positive position for both of those. They're both happening in Scorpio. So if we go back to our house placements, so this is for, Leo, right? Leo rising, this is what we had. We're talking about Mercury in um, doing something interesting with Jupiter in late Scorpio. Let me pull this onto one sort of screen so that you could see, right? We can see all of the stuff at once. Come on. There we go. And we can see here, right? We have Mercury trine Saturn happening in Scorpio. We have Mercury trine Jupiter. These are significant aspects, positive, great. They're happening in late Scorpio. So again, that is happening here for Leo rising. That means fourth house. So the language that is being used, right, is all about family member or roommates, things associated with fourth house. And what's not working, right, that is Saturn energy, the sort of restrictive energy. Flip the script, excuse me, flip towards positivity, the Jupiter energy. Name one thing that's going well, or at least okay. So express it verbally. That is Mercury energy. It's not just your thoughts, it's also your communication. Training your mind to notice the positives can help shift your dynamics. So then if we go to Gemini, right, it's probably going to have similar things. If you've been too focused on what's not flowing in your daily grind, flip the script. So again, that flipping from Sagittarius to Jupiter, focusing on the beneficial trine that's happening. Gemini, Scorpio, right? Late Scorpio, this is sixth house stuff. So if we go back here, where is Mercury active? Where is there a positive something happening, a positive shift? Your daily grind. That is sixth house stuff, right? Um, Shifting your mindset, that Saturn to Jupiter, having both of those trine Mercury, really, really helpful for the mental state. So then um, with Aries rising sign, right? If you've been focused on what's not working in your collabs, flip the script. We already talked about previously, collabs was new moon in Scorpio, right? So all of this stuff is happening in Scorpio. Eighth house stuff was collabs, right? So eighth house is where all of that Mercury action is going. So all of these horoscopes for November 22nd, they are looking at, where has that disappeared to, right? They are looking at this Mercury trine stuff that's happening on November 22nd. It's happening in Scorpio. So for Aries, that is eighth house. Oops. For Aries, that's eighth house, right? Because Scorpio is eighth house. For Gemini, that is sixth house, because Scorpio is sixth house. For Leo, that is fifth house, or sorry, fourth house, because Scorpio is fourth house. So everything that Mercury is doing, all of that flipping the script, that shifting of mindsets, it's happening in the area of your life that each of those houses represents if you are Aries, Gemini, or Leo. So you can do all of the same things. We could, let me pull up some other things here on, yeah, it'll be really interesting. So both of these days, November 23rd, this is, this note about November 24th, very early. So it's going to happen for those of us in the US on the 23rd. So let's see how that plays out. Super curious if it even comes up. November 23rd. Um, Fight for what matters to you today. So fight, that is Mars coded. Whether you're handling a shared bank account or applying for a grant, advocate for what you want. It's okay if you don't feel 100% confident. That may be speaking to the North node, um, right? So fighting is Mars energy, maybe where you don't feel confident, um, working sort of towards what you're aiming for. Now, Mars is in Sagittarius. So for Aries rising, that's going to be ninth house stuff. Um, Applying for a grant, expanded. Interesting. The shared bank account feels very eighth house, but fighting for what matters, right? The big picture that is very ninth house. What is the other thing that's happening? Sun sextile Pluto. But it doesn't feel like that is relevant to this particular horoscope. Gemini, take a time out to reconnect with yourself today. For Gemini rising, Sagittarius is in the seventh house, right? So Gemini rising, opposite that, Sagittarius, seventh house. So that Mars energy, that fighting for whatever, is going to be for the seventh house. Reconnect with yourself today. Um, Text a friend who gives great pep talks. Not sure if that's necessarily seventh house stuff. Um, but the reconnecting with yourself in the way that Chani articulates the seventh house, this feels very related to the seventh house. Then if we go to Leo, what is tomorrow's horoscope? You have more power than you think. What's one way you can use it today? Make your favorite snack or paint your walls whatever color you want. You're not limited by your past. Um, Honoring what you need right now. It's never too late. This is also somewhat abstract, but it does tap into a little bit fifth house energy. Good Lord. Which is Sagittarius, which is where all of that Mars action is happening. As I said, the nodes are, they're tied to sort of big karmic lessons, stretching yourself, returning to where you know, maybe feel overly comfortable. And that can go sort of both directions because anything that is square to the north node is also going to be square to the south node since those are opposing signs. Um, so yeah, a little bit more of a complicated thing. If we look at this will be November 24th because again, UTC very early in the morning. That means the 24th for those of us in the US, we have Mercury conjunct Venus. Let's see how that's described. Honesty is the glue that holds your foundations together. So, where is this happening? Scorpio. You may recall for Leo, Scorpio is fourth house, right? Scorpio, fourth house for Leo rising. Leo rising. Honesty is the glue that holds your foundations. That is fourth house. Today, put words to feelings. So, words, Mercury, feelings, maybe Venus. You've been hiding from people you call family. It's okay if they come out messy or imperfect. What matters is that they're real. It's always a risk to share something deep. Also, fourth house stuff. Take it, you don't know what's possible or what can be healed at home until you put your heart on the line. So, that heart tying into Venus, emotion, emotional, emotional security, uh, the like. Moon entering Aquarius. This is going to be the next day. This will be the 25th for us. Um, if we look at Gemini on the 24th, again, we have Mercury conjunction Venus is sort of the only thing going on that day. Pencil in heart to heart today. This is happening in Scorpio. So this is sixth house, right? We've got this Scorpio energy, sixth house. So that's where the Mercury Venus conjunction is happening. A heart to heart, that is both your heart and conversation. So that's Mercury, Venus. Put words to feelings you've been keeping to yourself. It's okay if they come out messy or imperfect. What matters is that they're real, sharing something deep. Okay, apparently the deep is not related to fourth house. Talking about work or wellness stuff, right? So that is the sixth house advice, um, right? Talk about, have the heart to heart around work and wellness, around sixth house stuff. If we then look at the Aries horoscope, truth heals, so more of the same sort of thing that we heard from Leo. So today, put words to the feelings you've been hiding from your collaborators. Collaborators is Scorpio, eighth house for Aries, right? We've seen collaboration a lot related to the eighth house. That's where Scorpio is for our Aries rising. It's okay if it comes out messy or imperfect. What matters is that they're real, right? All of this is sort of boilerplate for the Mercury Venus conjunction, that heart to heart, that's speaking what is sort of in your body. You won't know it's possible for your partnerships. Um, Talking through doubts and fears will help move past them. So, partnerships again feels very seventh house, but because it is tied to joint projects in the way that Chani is talking about them, and when I say Chani, I mean Chani.com. I don't know if Chani herself does all of these. Maybe she does, but talking through your doubts and fears, right? That is eighth house stuff. And again, this is for Aries rising, looking at eighth house because we're looking at Scorpio, because the Mercury Venus conjunction is in Scorpio. So all of that language updates, changes, gets more specific for um, the house where things are actually happening. If all you have is something like a moon transit, so in this case, November 25th, all we really have going on that day is that the moon enters Aquarius for Aries rising. Aquarius is the 11th house. I would expect to see things about the collective good, friends, networks, stuff like that. Long term projects, okay, fair. Um, the 11th house is also about the future. Um, yeah, so the sort of big dreams, travel, studies, I don't know what's going on there. There may be things happening in the ninth house. Who's that? Sagittarius. Oh, that's where the sun still is, right? So the focus for the entire month of Sagittarius is ninth house stuff. Pay attention to any anger or issues that flare up around these topics, then brainstorm fresh ways to approach them. Anger is tied to Aries. We'll see if anyone else mentions that. Sometimes problems can inspire you to get more creative. So, 11th house is associated with innovation. November 25th. Irritated with loved ones today. Okay, so there's definitely something frictiony going on. It could be part of Mercury retrograde, um, but possibly um, what else is going on with these? Mercury. I mean, Mercury is still in Scorpio. For Gemini, Scorpio is sixth house. Close relationships is seventh house, right? That's Sagittarius, where the sun is. Um, Anger that's flaring up with partner or best friend. So again, that would be seventh house stuff where the sun is. Who else is in Sagittarius? Mars is still there. Yeah, that's about it. And there's not really a bad aspect of significance there. Brainstorm fresh ways to approach them. Sometimes you have to get frustrated to make necessary changes. So this all just seems to be about some sort of negative Sagittarius energy. I'm suspecting that Leo will also reference that, except maybe it's going to be frustrations with hobbies. Um, right? Something's blocking you in your hobbies, love life, or creative projects. This is all fifth house stuff. So again, Fifth house is Sagittarius. This is probably about Sun and Mars both being in Sagittarius. I don't know why she's not bringing in the Aquarius moon transit. That's I would expect that. That's sort of common for horoscopes. So maybe I just, made a bad choice in Chani, but she is clever and popular. Um, and she has all of these up, easily navigable. Um, yeah. So I don't know where this stuckness is coming from the transits that I'm looking at, other than maybe it's just this like funky Mars stuff that's hanging around. Certainly, it does not seem to have anything to do with Moon Aquarius or Mercury Venus conjunction. If we look at the next day, we have Venus trine Jupiter, Venus trine Saturn, both in Scorpio. So we should see similar kinds of stuff as when we had Mercury trine Saturn, Mercury trine Jupiter, except instead of a mind shift, maybe it's going to be like a heart shift, right? In those same areas. Um, Hopefully, we can access this far in advance. Great. You deserve a break and some playtime too. Focus on the things that bring you joy today. It's okay if they're small. So, playtime, things that bring you joy. This is fifth house. Again, activity in um, Sagittarius, right? That sort of Sun and Sagittarius energy. Savoring a warm cup of tea or catching up with your chosen family is enough, um, right? That is fourth house. That is Scorpio, and that's where we get those nice Venus trines. If we look at Gemini, we'll see how this plays out. Go ahead, play hooky. Um, Today, pencil in some activities that put you at ease and expand your world. It's okay if they're small. All work and no fun isn't a healthy or sustainable lifestyle. So, healthy and sustainable is tied to sixth house. That's where we have Scorpio. I don't know what this has to do with seventh house, where Sagittarius is. So there is a little bit of variety as far as what's being called on in each of these horoscopes. Um, yeah, the chores and errands, that's all sixth house stuff. So Venus, Jupiter, they are not sixth house energies. So yeah, we're looking for, more fun things. And then um, for Aries, right, we're going to expect to see things related to Scorpio and or possibly Sagittarius. Want to get out of your own head. Being generous can do the trick. Today, focus on doing something that puts you at ease and helps others relax. So this is the same language that we've had before. This is very Venus, Jupiter. Focus on collabs and creative partnerships, right? This is our cue to eighth house, which is Scorpio, where all of that delicious Venus stuff is happening. It can be a small gesture, getting someone a coffee or listening to a loved one event is enough. That seems to be coming through in multiple of the horoscopes. Perhaps that's just the Venus Saturn connection. You don't need to tally everything you do for each other. So this is also eighth house stuff. Other people's resources, how you collaborate um, and share, showing up without any expectations can be its own reward. So all of this is focusing on Venus, Saturn, Jupiter happening in Scorpio, which for Aries is eighth house. So as you can see, some of these are a little bit more formulaic, predictable, others where there is either less interesting transits happening, or where there are, a variety of things, not all of which I have tracked in my sort of important transits notes. There could be other, some like less pleasant connections that are going on that are sort of lesser aspects, less important aspects, or that are just sort of like hanging over from a few days. Those may be feeding into what Chinese looking at, or she may be looking at things like Chiron and Lilith, which I don't think is Lilith is in this, but Chiron is not anywhere, or it could just be picking up on the residual Mercury retrograde energy, right? Which I, has is going on currently through all of those dates, still relevant. And so that kind of like difficulty in communication, that can just be an underlying concern for all of the horoscopes of this period. So it's sort of a fallback that you could get to, um, and isn't unique to any one sign, although where um, Mercury is, which is Scorpio, that does, that may actually be feeding into where those conversations may be difficult, right? So, whatever house Mercury is in, that is a more difficult area for that particular rising sign. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, let me know. If you have questions on the YouTube, I may or may not ever check it, but you can comment on Patreon or email me if you are part of the Semester of Divination, pop by office hours, etc. Uh, yeah, if this was helpful, let me know how and why, in what format, or if you have other questions that you would like to see answered in this kind of format, let me know. It, as I have time, I'm happy to do it.